listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome everyone. Today I'm joined with my friend Amanda Lynch. She is a wellness coach, yoga instructor, mother of 2 boys, and lead teacher at Guiding Light's hybrid homeschool. Through her spiritual path and studies in Ayurveda, astrology, yogic philosophy, and Waldorf education, she has seen a great transformation in her life and ultimately in her reality. She believes that her sankalpa, or deepest heart intention, is to be a conduit of alchemy, guiding and inspiring others to rediscover their divine nature. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I love having you. I'm so excited to do this episode with you. So for those who don't know you, could you give a little background on yourself and your spiritual journey?
Sure. So, as you stated, I'm a mama of 2 boys, and a yoga instructor, and an Ayurvedic health coach. But all of that is rather recent for me, other than being a mom, of course. Mm-hmm. So my spiritual journey has been quite the path. I was raised pretty much here in East Tennessee as a little girl and in a Pentecostal type of church. So very filled with the Spirit and, Holy Ghost, seeing it move throughout the church. And that was just how I was raised. So to me, that was normal.
Right.
And then it probably wasn't until about 5th grade or so that I had invited a friend who was raised very Baptist to church with me that I found out that was not very normal in the, for the most of the people that are Christians in this area.
Right.
So I think automatically when I was little, I was already kind of immersed in a more spiritual, almost metaphysical type of side of Christianity, which already kind of made me a little more fringe to those around me. And that's just kind of been my journey. So being raised that way, I really resonated with it when I was little. But what I resonated most with was the worship and the getting filled with the Spirit type of thing. And then, when the preacher would be preaching, I was like coloring books and not really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older and I'm listening, wanting more meat out of it, really wanting to hear what's in the Bible and know more about Jesus, it just kind of wasn't feeding me anymore. And then, having lots of childhood trauma also playing in as a factor, I kind of started moving away and really honestly started dabbling in lots of things that took me away from a spiritual path of Christianity and more so into just finding my own way, which I dove heavily into the occult at that point, and I just gobbled up every book I could find. Astrology, I wanted to know my whole natal chart. I cast my own chart. I'd learned from a book. Back then, I guess we had the internet, of course, but it wasn't the same as it is now, and it definitely wasn't as popular. Mm-hmm. So I just dove into that and just really started this self-study through all of that as well. And totally at that point actually renounced Jesus Christ as like my Lord and Savior, and just went through a whole transformation. Mm-hmm. And I actually got into a point where it was more of like I was almost living for debauchery, if that makes sense. So it was like I wanted to see how bad I could get, how deep could I go, what could I do that was just going to shock the pants off of everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I just really dove really deep into that, and that didn't really work out too well for me either, which it doesn't really work out for anyone. Not a sustainable path. So I finally realized something's not right here either. So, mm-hmm. I started getting fed spiritually with a lot of things I was reading, but I didn't know how to deal with all of that, and all the trauma that I had as a child, and still trying to work through all of that. And, I wasn't even 25 yet, so prefrontal cortex, not even fully developed. So then I finally came to this realization point of like, wow, I'm really being a crappy person to people in my life, and losing friends, and having some strained relationships with family, and not able to carry out romantic relationships too well. So then I was like, something's got to give. So I finally realized it was more of the party lifestyle and that type of thing that I needed to shut out. And so I was continuing to read my more pagan or esoteric type of books. I remember this very vividly. I was reading a book called Earth Time, Moon Time, which is all about the wheel of the year and the moon cycles. And I've shut out the people that I'm partying with. So I really had a lot of free time at this point. And I lived with my grandmother, and she still went to that little Pentecostal church that I was raised in. And she was just like, will you please come to church with me, honey? I'm like, all right, Nanny, I'll go to church with you. And so I'm going to church, and it's still the same pastor that, preached hellfire and brimstone when I was little. And I'm listening to his messages, and he's saying things that I'm reading in my Earth Time, Moon Time book. Like, they're touching on similar topics, and I just keep seeing like these synchronicities. So I'm like, okay, I'm hearing it here, and I'm reading things here, and I'm seeing also symbols around me of like things just keep making me feel like I'm being pulled more towards this path. And so I keep going to church with her. And one Sunday I just get this urge. It's like, I need to be saved again. I'm like, I don't know why I'm feeling this. Like, that's so against anything that I've like been feeling for a long time. But it was just this really powerful urge. And so I just looked over at my nanny. I'm like, I think I need to be saved. And of course she's, very emotional, and she's like, okay. And we go up to the altar, and I'm sitting down this little tiny church, like these people that most of them are my family, and they know, the journey I've been on. And, I look at my nanny, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, you just pray to Jesus, honey. You just tell Jesus what's on your heart. Okay. So, again, it's like, I try to like go into like almost a meditation at that point and just go really internal. And it's like, as soon as I said, Jesus, I'm so sorry, I was rushed with this vision of Jesus. And he says to me, you thought you were away from me. I was there right behind you the whole time. I never left. I was just waiting on you to see me. And I lost it. And I had this feeling come over me where I just put my hands up, and I started screaming at the top of my lungs, and I could feel things leaving my body. I don't know what. I don't like to call it demonic. It's just, there was just some strongholds that maybe trauma also was part of that was just releasing out. And I was shaking and just screaming. And then finally started coming down, and, everything started coming back in the room. And then I'm looking around, seeing all these, everyone with big eyes. But of course, everyone's also very happy. And I go and sit down, and it just so happened there was an evangelical preacher there that Sunday. He was visiting, and very, very country man. And he gets up and he says, honey, I ain't seen something like that in a church in a long time. And that's great. I'm just like, I know, like, I don't know what just happened, but that was wild. And so then I, really became very on fire for Jesus. I wanted to know everything I could about Jesus, and just really wanted to dig into all of that and what being a disciple meant, and just really reading the Bible and trying to understand it with new eyes and with my own perspective, not this dogmatic thing. I had this new perspective where I've learned all these truths from all these other religions, and I've been practicing all these other things that still feel like home to me, but yet I am turning back to Jesus. So it's like almost a pendulum swing back, but not too far. And I did kind of, put away my esoteric books. I got rid of my tarot cards for a bit. I, just put all that away for a bit and really dove into biblical studies and going to church and things of that nature. And then I had a child, and then my whole spiritual journey totally changed when I became a mom. It was really learning a lot more about being a mother than anything else. So since that, the pendulum has started swinging back a little more towards the middle, and I've yoga, Ayurveda, all of the same things that I've always been drawn to are still very much part of my life, my path, and I've really found a way to integrate both things and come to my own path and my own understanding that, sometimes it's uncomfortable for people on one side or the other to hear, because we're so used to these things not being able to exist together. And I really feel like I'm being called to kind of show people there is a way for this to be, a coexisting thing where we can have people that agree to disagree about things and still meet in the middle about things too.
Right. I really love how you're basically like a bridge between these two worlds. And it's so beautiful. And I've been so drawn to you because, I work with Jesus all the time. He's one of the Ascended Masters. That's in the records a lot. And so I never lost the connection to Jesus, even though I don't label myself as a Christian any longer, because I like to be more open.
Yeah.
But I love that you are able to create this bridge, and you're like, you can be both. We don't have to, exclude the other. So what if we allowed all of it, And even when you're like, you're studying the occult stuff and now you hear the preacher, that was already creating this bridge.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing, okay, there's like, these are corresponding truths. So we're just like, I might have not been seeing it that way. So it's almost like when you studied the esoteric, it gave you a deeper appreciation.
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful. So I love that story. And I think a lot of people are on that, it's like a spectrum of back and forth. And when we're studying astrology, we have opposing houses, and we tend to go to this one or the next. And but at the end of the day, it really is like that fulcrum in the middle. That's like the sweet spot, is like that place between these extremes. And I think Jesus really was an advocate of the middle path. He had a lot of that Buddha vibe about him. And I think that he would be supportive of, you saying, oh, I'm a Christian, but I'm also accepting of these other faiths. And I actually see beauty and wisdom there.
Yeah.
I think he would be all for that. So that's really beautiful, because I think we don't see a lot of Christians coming out saying, it's okay that you're different from me. Like, I don't have to convert you to love you.
Right.
And I don't, I think that that's how Jesus would have been. I think he would have loved the Buddhist, I don't think he had been like, well, sorry if you don't follow me. I think he would have honored their path and been able to see, okay, well, there's a lot of similarities. So I feel like you're being very Christ-like in your approach. And it's so beautiful to witness that, because I don't think a lot of us have a healthy example of someone who truly is just open-minded and loving. Yeah. And that's like kind of the whole point in all the spiritual paths.
Yeah.
Can we bridge these gaps? Can we love one another? Can we see the beauty in our different beliefs?
Yeah.
Just the fact that you're even open, to being on a metaphysical podcast, like that shows that there is an opportunity within the faith for growth in that way.
And I love listening to the podcast, so I love all the topics. So.
Oh, awesome. I love hearing that. So let's talk a little bit about Ayurveda. What is it, and how has incorporating this approach to wellness benefited you over time?
So Ayurveda is kind of known as a sister science to yoga. Obviously, it comes from the name Ayurveda, so it is the study of life, where it's really been transformative for me in my yoga journey, because for me, I started doing yoga when I was like, probably 15, 16. I was on the dance team in high school, so it was like kind of like part of our fitness training was doing some yoga and stretching, and I'm kind of hypermobile and always have been throughout my life, so like it just felt like really good. But it was very fitness. So it's like a VHS tape, I can't remember the girl's name, but,
like
wearing
Denise Austin.
Yes, Denise Austin. It was.
I had the same problem.
Oh my gosh. That's where my yoga journey started.
Yeah, I got my tape at a Goodwill.
I don't even know where. Probably thrift store, probably, or a yard sale. But I would just, use my little tape, and it was very, very physical. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my yoga practice grew a bit. I've really loved Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube. She was like one of my favorites.
I think I remember her.
And she does talk, she starts getting a little more deep with a lot of her cueing, and she talks a lot throughout her practicing. So it's starting to get a little deeper for me. But then when I stumbled across Ayurveda, it was actually, I randomly saw something from Katie Silcox, and she is an author, and she actually is the creator of the Ayurveda school I went to. It just popped up on Instagram, and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I listened to her first little freebie talk on it, and it just felt like, oh yeah, this is really, really where I'm being called. Now I had like read a couple books before on Ayurveda. It was very medical, very masculine approach, and she takes a very feminine form approach to Ayurveda. So that might be why it like more resonated with me at that point. But it showed me how my physical practice is my spiritual practice. They're all integrated. It's the study of life. So it's, it's not just doing the yoga asanas. It's what are we eating and putting into our bodies? Oh, what season is it? How do we feel right now in this season? And really even tuning your yoga practice to fit what's going on with you and your body right here, right now. And so that just totally opened a whole new layer for me that just blew my mind. And I just wanted to really dive deep into it after that. And then learning my dosha constitution. So, I dabbled in my birth chart. I knew a lot of that. I read a little bit about human design. But then digging into my Ayurvedic constitution through a whole new thing that I could discover about myself. So your dosha constitution, we have 3 major players in Ayurveda: Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. So Kapha is like that wet, juicy, earthy, grounded energy. Pitta is your fire, your transformative fire. And then Vata is the air. So you can see how a lot of people have we have all 3, just like our birth chart has all of the signs of the zodiac in one house or another.
Right.
Our doshic constitution, we have all 3, but we just have more dominant players, some of us. Now, some people are tridoshic when they have all 3, and they're actually more likely to become out of balance because they have so much energy at play. But really finding out that, like, I myself am a Pitta dominant person. Oh, that fire, that transformation. I'm a very fiery person, and I tend to burn myself out. And in summertime, oh, this would explain why I have summer eczema, not winter eczema. Why in the summer I can get very inflamed, my joints swell up because I'm already Pitta dominant. So learning about that, it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't be doing tons of power yoga in the summer if I'm already going to burn myself out and be inflamed. I actually need to bring in more softness, more slowness, and maybe do some more qigong. So it kind of added this whole new way of seeing how to live my life in all aspects: how I eat, how I drink, even what I wear, just everything. It just added this whole new lens for me, and it really transformed my life in that, I've finally realized, oh, I push myself too much. So as a mom, I was constantly feeling fatigued because I'm always drained, because I'm always wanting to get up and do everything. And I don't have the spoons to keep it all going, So it's like giving myself a little more compassion, saying, oh, you're feeling really burnt out. Your pitta is really high right now. What can you do to bring that down and be softer and move slower and really make decisions and be a better mom and a better wife and a better friend to everybody, because you're actually trying to fine-tune things for yourself.
Right. I've been told that I was Pitta dominant as well. And it's interesting because I think we try to compare ourselves to other people, but some people, they're like strength training and they're pushing and like when I try to do that, like I am just I can't do anything else. So like treadmilling, like all the cardio stuff. I'm not saying cardio is bad, but it wasn't feeling right for me.
Yeah.
But like when I would do yin or like restorative yoga, I really liked yin yang, like this balance. I felt like I had energy in the class, but no one really taught me about this. It was something I just sort of was like feeling, and I'm like, I just don't No, like I don't want to do hot yoga at all. Like heat actually makes me like really anxious and I'll start like getting
Yes.
blotchy and I'll actually have like a histamine response sometimes when I get overheated.
Same.
But like I kept trying to compare myself to other people, I think, and I was like, but they're doing it and like they look great and they're healthy. But I love that it is a little bit more individual and it's like don't compare yourself to other people. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
You know? And it's so cool that there's people like you out here that can look at our charts or just study our energy and like what we're drawn to and say, okay, well, this is why. It's because it's a hot season. Like maybe that would be fine in the winter for you.
Yeah.
But right now it's a no, you know? So that's interesting that we have a similar constitution. I'm also Aries sun and Mercury, so I have a little bit of fire. And I tend to have like heartburn or like I just get hot sometimes. And like I want to cool down and that just doesn't feel good at all for me. So that's interesting. Do you have any tips for balancing our dosha during the different seasons for like the different types?
So what I would say is, even if you don't know your doshic constitution, our whole society is kind of in a vata burnout right now. So think about like we're on the internet all day. We have this like global connection that is totally new, you know. So our society is very fast paced. It wants to move, and you know, next idea, next big thing. There's some pitta element there, you know, especially in a capitalist society.
Right.
There's a lot of the production driven pitta energy, but lots of vata burnout. And I feel like that's why we see a lot of people right now reaching for everything that soothes the nervous system and really getting into like vagus nerve toning and, even the cold therapy, which is going to help get you in that rest and digest mode, that would be the first thing that I would treat for anyone, really, is let's look at vata and how can we ground? Like, let's be more grounded. Just practice every day to ground yourself, whether it's first thing waking up in the morning and just taking that minute to sit and just really feel grounded and settled before moving on with your day. And another thing that I tell everyone, and this doesn't matter your doshic constitution, is when you get up in the morning, what's the first thing you're drinking? Because if it's not warm lemon water, you're probably going ahead and setting yourself in a wrong direction for the day. Because that has been life-changing for me and also other people that I've worked with, is just taking that first bit of the day to first I scrape my tongue, get all the toxins off my tongue, and then I drink my warm lemon water. It almost like regulates my blood pressure. And I just feel so much better throughout the day. And I noticed that to begin with. Like that was one of the first Ayurvedic practices I took on was the tongue scraping and then warm lemon water. And it totally changed because I used to wake up and first thing was coffee. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm throwing caffeine on someone who's already burnt out all the time.
Right.
And my adrenals are just shot all the time. So it was like taking that time to say, no, I don't need to caffeinate first thing in the morning. What I need to do is sit and feel warm and cozy and give myself a minute to feel grounded and nourished before I move on into anything else. And I think that's been one of the most key things for quite a few people that I've worked with as well. And then just looking at the season. So like we're in Pitta season right now because it's summertime. So you can think of the same doshic types as seasons. So summertime is that Pitta energy, and when we start moving into early fall, when it starts to be kind of dry, everything's starting to dry out and leaves are changing, we're moving into Vata. So we're coming out of summer right now and moving into Vata season. So that's also going to benefit, whatever doshic constitution you have is really paying attention to Vata. And like another practice that I really love, especially once it starts turning, our weather starts turning here, is a daily abhyanga or oil massage. Even if you can't do like a full lymphatic massage, just putting oil on every day just to help nourish and coat the body is another really great practice.
So in Vata season, would we want to be even more grounded because it's naturally going to be more airy?
Yes.
So like, walking on the earth barefoot more often? Or is there like teas?
Yes, you could
Probably.
do, but you really want to try to avoid stimulants,
Okay.
caffeines, and
Because
things
that's
like that.
airy, naturally airy.
Yeah, and very mobile. So you really want to incorporate lots of oils. So even like in your tea or coffee, adding some fats to that.
Okay.
Incorporating more oily foods and things that are, not unhealthy oily, of course, because that would be inflammatory.
Right.
But like good things like ghee or a good quality olive oil, something that's very nourishing and grounding. So applying oil to the body as well as intaking more oils and fats and good fats and things like that. Which if we look back at when we lived off of the land, we did that. This was harvest season, so we're harvesting, we're getting everything, and then what do we have in harvest season? We have big festivals where we eat and we take in soups, lots of soups and things that are easier to digest. That's another big thing for Vata season as well, is making sure that when you're eating, it's things that you can easily digest, because in Vata we tend to have more constipation, gas. It's just harder for the body to digest. So really having foods that are more broken down, like a soup, bone broth, stuff like that, is a lot more beneficial. And we also equate like cold weather with, a lot of times we want to have peppermint in the wintertime, but that's also, it's like, okay, understand why we like with association with winter and the coldness, but we actually need to be countering that and doing more of the warming things in the winter and the fall time. So, your cinnamon, your cardamom, lots of turmeric, ginger, all those good pungent spices, and really spicing the food as well.
Like the golden milk teas.
Oh,
And
yes.
Stuff like that. I started like smelling that as you were describing it.
Yes, that'd be a really great Vata nighttime ritual.
Yeah.
Some golden milk.
Lovely, lovely. So what is an Ayurvedic health coaching session with you like? What are some of the ways that you've been able to help people?
So what I've tried to do is really incorporate Western astrology and Ayurvedic health coaching, and my yogic training as well, to where we take an initial assessment and just see, okay, what is your doshic constitution? What type of health issues are you having right now? And by health, mental, physical, emotional, all the layers, all the koshas. So we want to look at the whole being and really get a good assessment first for, where are you right now in your constitution, and also an imbalance. So one thing I did forget to mention earlier is with Ayurveda, we have a constitution. So I'm a Pitta dominant person. But just like we have a natal chart in astrology, and then we have a daily horoscope, well, we could be out of balance in any kind of way. So I can be a Pitta dominant person, but in Vata imbalance. So it really doesn't matter what constitution I have. I could experience any imbalance,
Right.
Kapha, Vata, or Pitta. I'm just more predisposed to Pitta burnout. But I can experience a Vata imbalance.
Right, like if you were studying for like a final and spending like weeks
Yes.
cramming information, that might be too much air.
Yes. And even people who are a little more Vata sensitive, lots of travel can also push you into Vata burnout as well.
Okay.
Lots of moving energy. So it's really interesting how you can, kind of tweak your care based on not just my doshic constitution, but also what am I experiencing right now? And you can just constantly assess, how am I feeling today? Do I feel like I'm very high Pitta right now? I've got a lot of anger outbursts coming out. Or are you feeling very Kaphic, kind of lethargic and stuck and depressed? It's really looking at how do I feel right here, right now, and what can I do to benefit, myself. So we look at, when I work with someone, we look at the doshic constitution, current imbalances, and then also what's going on seasonally. So it being Pitta season, what can we do to really align ourselves with the season? How can our lifestyle practices align with the season? So, we want to take care of imbalances. We want to know our doshic constitution, but ultimately, we want to live in harmony with everything around us. So it's also looking at that seasonal aspect as well. And And then I like to, like I said, I use Western astrology, so I'll give my clients, our current transits that are coming up, or new moon or full moon, whatever is going on. We incorporate that into our coaching sessions, so I can say, okay, so we're going to work on this practice, and maybe here's a full moon ritual you could do to incorporate in your Ayurvedic journey. So it's kind of a mesh of Wheel of the Year journey and Ayurveda and astrology.
I love that. I love how you're just combining it all together. That's really cool. So we just had Aquarius full moon. Would that have increased the Vata for everyone collectively a little bit?
Yeah, I would feel so, because being an air sign and a very movable, type of energy. And, it's really funny that we've had a lot of this disclosure stuff happening around this time. So I feel like collectively we're already kind of feeling that big Vata that's coming, that big push, even seasonally, that we're about to see too.
Right. That's very interesting. So let's explore a little bit about the Kundalini Yoga. What is it, and what are some of the different benefits that come with incorporating these types of practices into our daily lives?
So with Kundalini Yoga, that was also a big transformation for me. I had heard of Kundalini Yoga many times, just dabbling in yoga and doing, I really did a lot of vinyasa practice. And I'd heard of it, and then I would look it up, and I'd see people like all wearing these white turbans, and, it looked really weird. And they're talking about a snake rising up your, oh my goodness, there's a snake, and so it kind of felt a little, even for me, a little fringe, and then, but I still kept feeling like this little call, like, check into Kundalini, like, check it out. And it just so happened that my best friend, who wasn't my best friend at the time, she started posting about Kundalini Yoga. And so I was like, oh, well, I think I'm ready to kind of learn about this. So she led me to download an app that had Gurumukh doing some videos on there. And, there's this like 80-year-old woman leading this yoga class and kicking my butt. I mean, I'm holding my arms up in the air, like for, however many minutes, like shaking and like feeling. I hear people say all the time they have emotional releases in their hips. Mine, for some reason, is shoulders.
I could see
and it started equating it to like wearing the weight of the world on your shoulders. And,
right, exactly. Especially with trauma.
Yes. So I felt like, oh, wow, this is so different. And kind of like with Ayurveda, it was so different where it's way more spiritual. Where, most of the yoga channels I was watching on YouTube at that time were very, they were kind of dabbling in things, but it wasn't ever talking about God,
Right, they're not upfront about why we're doing the practices, besides this is healthy.
Yes. Whereas Kundalini Yoga is like, this is a very specific Kriya for this very specific purpose, and we're connecting with God, and we are raising energy through, the chakras all the way up, and it just felt so meaningful. And even doing the practices where you'll raise the energy and then stop and let it set in the awareness phase, that was so key for me, because just like you said, I think we were talking earlier about being Pitta dominant, and, like cardio doesn't feel good for me. It's just it's too much. It's too exhausting. Even like power yoga, I will kind of burn myself out because I want to perform so much.
Right.
And I will want to go to the nth degree,
Yes.
Kundalini makes me stop.
Right.
It raises you up, and then you stop and you let it sit. And I need that. I need that pause. Take a minute, let it rest, because I have such a hard time stopping and resting. And like yin yoga is very hard for me as well, because it's so slow. And I'm not pushing. So it's like Kundalini has been that middle path, of like, we're going to push and it's going to be hard, but it's also going to be resting in this ease and feeling like this real spiritual experience. And so much so that when I had taken on my Ayurvedic training, I already knew I was committed to that. I'd paid for that year-long program. I started dabbling in the Kundalini Yoga, and I had no intentions of being a yoga teacher whatsoever. And then the Kundalini journey just kept growing alongside the Ayurveda journey. And I'm like, yeah, it's time to become a yoga teacher as well. So I actually started taking yoga teacher training at the same time as doing Ayurveda school, and finished both of them around the same time. And it's just been a total transformation. I mean, it took my yoga and my Ayurveda practice and really brought them together into one, and where I am not a morning person. I'll just say that to anyone that knows me. Maybe it's my Taurus rising, my Pisces moon, a combination. I have never been a morning person because I've always been fatigued and worn out. But it has like made me want this. Oh, I want to get my circadian rhythm, and I want to get up with the sun. I want to, get up and start feeling, I want to do my spiritual practice before the sun's really rising, and then before my kids are waking up. And that way I've filled my cup before they are waking up. And it really has transformed me as a person. It's so funny. I have a picture that I've still yet to share on social media because I don't know if it's going to come off as too vain, and I'm trying to think of how to word it. But I recently had to have my license remade when I got married, and I got to keep my old license, and I looked at the pictures and I put them together, and the change in my face, just my face, is insane. Now my older picture, I had just had my son, so new mom, and I wasn't wearing much makeup. You can see on her face that she is drained, that there is just so much life force that's just being sucked out and not filled back in. And then in my newest picture, you can see a glow. It's just a glow. And it's not just my highlighter, which is really a bomb. It's, just my face even. Just the smile is more genuine. And it's, honestly, I equate it to all of these practices that I have learned because I so needed them as a mom. And that's why I feel so called to really share this with mothers and women in general. Of course, I'm open to working with men. I love men. I love the balance of both. And I feel like men really do need this because we as women just seem to be a little more intuitive with our bodies because we have to be. We have a monthly cycle, whereas men don't.
And just
in
like
that
the
way.
process of giving birth and things like that, you kind of have to lean in on your own.
Yeah.
Trust your body a little bit more.
So I'm definitely love to work with all genders, everyone, but really I feel this is so beneficial for moms and women because we feel so drained and we're not taking the time to really care for ourselves. And we can say self-care, and you can go get a pedicure and you can go get all the, massage, and that's great. But when you're not integrating that spiritual aspect, I feel like there's still something so missing, that we need to find that integration of the physical and the spiritual, all the koshas, all the bodies, right? All coming together, and even looking at, okay, what's going on in the world around me? Like how,
the environment.
Yes. How is that also affecting me right now? And I feel like that through my journey of Kundalini yoga and Ayurveda, it's just brought me to this path of finding something that really works for me because it's so personable. Right. So it's lots of practices. I mean, there's thousands of kriyas you could do in Kundalini yoga. I mean, there's a kriya for keeping up with your children. You can find all kinds of practices specifically for something. And it's like you could take an 11-minute practice and get the same type of workout or energy, whatever you want to call it, than like taking an hour and a half long yoga class. For me personally, anyway, I've experienced that. And I know a lot of people that have done Kundalini yoga have also experienced that as well. Yeah,
for sure. It's definitely energizing. I feel like it's affecting you even at the etheric, the aura, where the asanas are very physical, but like you said, it's like all the koshas are a part of it. And all the different bodies. Like I know with Kundalini yoga, it's like the 10 bodies and all these levels. It's even more than the koshas. It actually gets a little confusing. I feel like you almost need to take notes sometimes. But that's the one thing I really love about Kundalini yoga. It's funny that you said it's good for moms because like I started doing it when my son was 6 months old. That's when I just discovered it. And I always like tell people this. I got so high from this class that I left my abusive ex the same day. I literally left this class. He started yelling and cussing me because I was like 20 minutes late. And I was like, okay. And I like went home and packed my stuff and told him, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Because I finally felt like all this energy. I knew what it was like to have that vitality again. And I'd kind of lost that, giving birth, not really having the support. And then I go to this class. It was my first time away from my child.
Wow.
And it was really transformative. And I just felt so wonderful. And then I left him and then I kept going. So for 2 years, I went to every single class and it became a really big part of like my identity in a way. And I did all the things and I still do a lot of it. I don't go to class as much just because now I have 2 kids and my teacher always tells me I can bring them, but I'm like, people meditating,
Yeah.
My kids aren't going to sit still. But yeah, it was transformative for me, and not just in a health kind of way, but nurtured my spirit and really helped, I felt like, reconnect me to my higher self.
Yeah.
It helped me connect to my past lives even. I started, having, like very vivid dreams and, I'd be doing these like meditation, like moving my hands in front of my eyes and I would start seeing things.
Mm-hmm.
I would be meditating with a partner and I would see them morph into other versions of themselves. And
Awesome.
it was like such a magical thing that I'm like, we're not just sitting in the park like panting, like, but I would always like kind of laugh because we would always do it outside and like there'd be the joggers like, what the heck, as we're like got our legs spread wide with our tongue out. But I mean, I've had so many mystical experiences with that. Like I probably like couldn't even recall them because it was like every single class I would have a new wave of understanding. But something I didn't realize, because before Kundalini yoga, I'd just done like you with the VHS tapes and things, is that other yoga classes don't like have this group energy where I would bring tea. I would even bring glass teacups. Okay. Like everyone had their teacup. We would drink tea and it was donation based. So you bring fruit or, nuts or whatever. And at the end, we would just sit for like an hour and just drink tea and talk. And we would talk about like health and wellness and what's going on in the world and all the things that you said. But then, later on, I started trying to go to just random yoga classes. And I was like, well, the class would end and I didn't feel connected to the teacher really. Yeah. And I got kind of sad. I was like, this doesn't feel like a community. Yeah. This doesn't feel like we're lifting each other up. I don't even know this person's name next to me. You know what I mean? And it made me appreciate the closeness of my Kundalini yoga class because there was like 3 or 4 of us. There'd be a random person that would come and go sometimes. But, we could really support each other because we knew each other's journey. Yeah. And it wasn't weird. We'd be like, oh, I just had this visualization. And everyone gets it. They're not like, okay, someone smoked a little herb before they came to class. Which I feel like if I went to another yoga class and was like wanting to talk after, people would be like, okay, this girl, So yeah. I don't know. I really loved the focus on all of the aspects of the self and not just the physical. Yes. So as much as I think that that's good, like if that's where you're at and your physical body is like wrecked and you need that practice, that's great. Yeah. But I think Kundalini yoga, my yoga teacher would be like, it's like taking the jet plane up the mountain versus walking. He's like, you could take a car, you could ride a donkey, you could walk, you could sit and camp for a little bit. It doesn't matter. But Kundalini yoga will take you there fast. And like at the time I didn't think about it, but it really is, it's super advanced. And he would always tell me that, that not just everyone gets to do it. And that if you feel called to, it's a past life thing. Or it was something that you had set in motion before you incarnated. So it's actually like a gift to be able to do it. Wow. So that's why like sometimes you'll try to tell people about it and they can't hear you. And it's actually because it's not supposed to be, for them, it's a very advanced form. Yeah. And so that made me feel so, like good in a way. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. And I still do the mantras. Like every time I do a show, I go through all the mantras. I call in the guides and clear out the limiting things. And my daughter she doesn't know the whole mantra, But she'll just go around saying, it's such. It's super cute. I try to like teach her the end of it, but she just gets really focused on odd such. But I try to do it even with my kids, just, you know, here or there. And my son like eats it up, you know. He's so good at like he like immediately went into meditation mode, and I'm sure that that's probably a pass off thing, but
That's awesome.
But I just love that it's becoming more of a thing, and it, you know, like more people have heard of that, of it. And like, I couldn't believe it when I was like seeing that other people were finally teaching it.
I know I feel like it's really growing. You know, we had our morning Kundalini class last week at Renegade Yoga Center. And we had our biggest attendance that we've had so far last week, 7:30 in the morning, which was, I mean, we had, I think 8 people came out, which is great for that time in the morning. And I really feel like it's starting to catch on. You know, it seems intimidating. Like you said, it's more advanced. I mean, we're doing pranayama, we're doing meditation, asana, kriya. You know, we're mixing everything together, and there's lecture. Right. You know, we're learning about, you know, astrology or the 10 bodies, the chakras. So it's like taking all the 8 limbs, you know, that you can, and trying to put it all into one. And it is a lot for some people. And, you know, some people might come try the class and they're like, whoa, that was a bit much. And, you know, and maybe that's just not for them right now. But I think once you kind of experience it, then you know, okay, this is different. And really, Kundalini yoga is supposed to be for the householder yogi. You know, I mean, most yogis for a long time were like renunciates, ascetics, you know, and the householder yogi, I feel like, is what's becoming more popular, of course, now. And I feel like Kundalini yoga is a big part of like, okay, yes, you can do your YouTube video at home, right? But you're not going to get a big transformation, you know, if you're not kind of incorporating these other deeper aspects.
And the community that comes with it.
And the community, yes. Because, you know, I've actually had people reach out to me about, you know, I feel like I'm having this Kundalini awakening and I don't know what to do. And like, it can feel like when you start really transforming, things can start moving fast. Like you said, it's like the jet plane going up. Yeah. It can move really fast. And if you're not someone that's already just very, very into like transformation and alchemy and that type of stuff, it can feel a little unnerving, or a little scary even. And so I think that's why it's so important to have that community, because it's like we're all on this journey, and yeah, we've been there, and yeah, sometimes it might feel like our heart chakra is a little stuck, or like it's not rising, or you know, something's going on, and that's okay. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's all a practice. It's all a journey. So I think the community is a really big part of it too.
Right. And just having someone to guide you. So if you are having like some kind of side effect after a meditation, you can be like, well, that might be because the energy is opened, or maybe you should drink this tea. Yes. Because that can help settle this. So yeah, my teacher, I mean, I guess he kind of became a guru to me, because like he really was just sort of holding my hand through this awakening process and guiding me and all of that. So... And there's just so many things, like all the points on the hands. And so it's like acupressure kind of comes in. And there's so many different schools of thought in Kundalini yoga. Could you explain a little bit about like why they wear white and what the turban is doing? Yes. Why they wear the turbans?
So I'm sure, as anyone would probably see, I don't wear white all the time, right? I practice Kundalini yoga, but I'm not constantly wearing a turban. But when I do teach, I wear all white. I don't cover my head. But the reason is that it's really for our aura and for projecting out the aura. And if we think about color associations, you know, black is absorbing, it's taking in, and we think of going inside, and white is very expansive. So wearing white is just to help expand the aura, expand the auric field, and especially for the teacher, so that I can expand out, you know, that energy that we're cultivating. And of course, it just when I started kind of wearing white, even in my home practice, I could feel a difference in my practice. It just gave, and maybe that's just a mind thing, who knows? But it
placebo is still happening.
it's still valid because it still gave me that feeling. Now with the head covering, I have practiced that some, and that really is for containing. So from the crown of the head, we want the energy to rise, and we want our aura to be magnetic and expansive, but we don't want that energy to escape through the crown. So covering the head is that's the practice for that. And I have noticed a difference when I do wear a head covering, of really feeling more contained.
Right.
Now, I don't wear it all the time, but even I feel like tying the hair up in a knot on top of the head is also very beneficial. And really, when I do yoga with my hair down, it is a different feeling. And sometimes I like that. Right. But a lot of times I need it up and I need it tied up just because it just gives me a different energetic feel.
Yeah, I can remember my teacher talking about coiling it on the crown. So you coil it on the crown, then you put the turban on. And he would talk about that the turban, there's also acupressure points on the head. And so where the turban is touching, it's also activating different things. So I used to like wearing the turban. And I really would feel like mentally I would be more open to receiving, and it actually felt comfortable for me. So I don't wear a turban a lot now, but I wear a hat all the time. Like if I leave my house, I'll wear a hat. And I started noticing that when I went out without a hat on, that I would get incredibly overwhelmed by my environment. So I started wearing the hat. I started thinking about it. I'm like, we've got people wearing turbans. We've got the Jewish people that wear the, I can't think of the name.
I don't remember what it's called.
They're covering that space, kind of containing it. But I noticed that if I just wear a hat, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. It's just like something about covering the head helps me ground and not take on other people's energies. And I'll even spray it, like my therapist has psychic protection, and I'll spray my hat and put it on. And this might be totally placebo, but I've been able to go to like concerts and things like that. And my friends that aren't doing it, they're like, oh, I have to go outside. I'm having a panic attack. And I'm like, I can feel like that it's overwhelming, but I feel good. And it might be totally in my mind, but I'm like, I think it's because my energy is kept in, and I'm not just blasting other people and they're not blasting me.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I was reading too the other day, the monks were actually shave that area because they want the energy to come in. So it's like kind of the opposite of blocking it.
Yeah.
And so that when they were praying, they would, nothing would be in the way.
Yeah. And
they would get like direct guidance from God or whatever, which was an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. I know. I kind of see both
right.
sides,
Like there could be benefit to covering and then allowing it to be open.
But also I kind of think of like, okay, if I am a householder yogi, do I need to be more protective? Whereas a monk lives in a monastery and, maybe
they're already protected and they're living in a, a sacred
a bubble,
space.
Kind of.
Right. Where we're having to go out into the world.
Yeah.
And so it's, any protection we have might be beneficial for not picking up on the unwanted psychic energies of every, there's a lot of depressed people. There's a lot of like traumatized people. And if you're sensitive to energies, you're going to, absorb that. And as a generator, my aura literally engulfs people around me. And so like I have to be really careful. So I use that psychic protection spray very mindfully because of like getting burnout from it. Too much air. It feels like too much air. Like it's too mental. Like I start like hearing the thoughts of all these other people. I'm like, wow, the world's a really busy, fast moving place. So,
and even thinking Ayurvedically, like that's high vata.
Right.
So what do we want to do with vata? Cover, warm, nurture.
So
wrap.
The head covering would keep you warm naturally.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I love how it all interconnects.
Yeah.
Like you were saying something earlier and I just heard my teacher was like, press the mercury mound. And I was like, I wonder if that activates vata. And like, I just never understood what that connection he was making with it was.
Yeah.
But it does like trigger like that mental activity, which mercury would. So yeah, it's really cool that like astrology and all that can be incorporated into it. All right. So let's change it up a little bit. And talk a little bit about Waldorf education. Can you share a little bit of info about Guiding Lights, the co-op that you teach at, and what really drew you to the Waldorf education style?
Yeah, so I am a teacher at Guiding Lights Co-op. It's a hybrid homeschool. So we're taking a year off right now and rebuilding, and we've got some very exciting developments in the wing that we're all really, really excited to work for. But my whole draw towards this homeschooling journey, and Waldorf in particular, is really kind of like what we've been talking about, really embodying, and doing so through education, because our children are, when we're handing them workbooks and, they're seeing these abstract forms of these letters and numbers, and it's so abstract for them that we're forcing them into these boxes of things that they aren't quite ready for yet. And it's, especially in our culture right now where, in kindergarten, I was taking naps and drawing on aluminum foil with markers.
Right.
Like, that's not what kindergarten is anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed with my first son, I had him in a private school to begin, a 5-day-a-week private school. He was not doing too well about second grade. And I was, kind of going into a conversation with a teacher, and it was kind of turning into like, he's not disruptive, but when I'm teaching, he's like flying airplanes with his pencil, and he's in a war, and he's in his own mind, and, kind of hinting towards the ADD type of stuff. And have you ever taken him to a doctor? And that's when I kind of started realizing this isn't going to work for him.
Right.
I'm not going to stifle his creativity and what they call in the education world being gifted, which we know lots of people, I'm sure of your listeners, were probably gifted as as children, and then turned out, oh, we're all neurodivergent, and and it's a superpower, but when we're in this box of how we think education should be, it's really set up for the kids that can take tests well.
Right.
And thankfully, I was someone that could take tests well when I was little. So I did okay in school, but I was always struggling. It was always harder for me than some of my friends. So I was making the good grades, but it was really hard for me. And then when I stumbled across Waldorf education, really through teaching at Guiding Lights. So I got my teaching degree, I got my job at Guiding Lights, and the director's like, I think we really need to take a Waldorf approach, because this is like a brand new thing. And I'm like, oh yes, I've dabbled in Waldorf before. I've heard of it. I love like all the colors and the fairies, the little gnomes, and it's just so etheric. And I was like, yes, that sounds awesome. So then I go and I like buy Steiner's like lectures and reading all the books, and my mind's just like, oh my gosh, just light bulbs and all these really deep revelations about education and meeting the child where they are developmentally, and really seeing like how we're pushing right now way too early, and how we need to ratchet that back and really take a child-centered approach to education. Not, we need you to fit in this box and be a cog in the wheel. No, we need you to invent new wheels. We need you to invent some new things. And how are you ever going to do that if we're always putting people in a box? And, if you're not passing the tests and you're not, meeting the grade. And Waldorf is so not like that.
Right. There's like room for all these different temperaments. So, we have public schools set up for the sanguine type, which they perform great. They're very pleasurable to be around. They're happy. They absorb information. They regurgitate it very well. Those children do great in public school.
Yeah.
But what about the kids like me who are full of melancholy? Okay, but Steiner sees that. He sees that these different temperaments change the way that we absorb information.
Yeah.
And so I needed more art. I grew up to be an artist.
Yes.
And these people were gaslighting me, telling me that that's, that I needed to do these other things. And I'm like, no, I need to be writing poetry. I need to be reading the books that I'm drawn to,
Yes.
So I feel like that one of the big things that jumped out immediately was the temperament types, and how there's actually, the teacher is educated to recognize the different temperaments and say, okay, this child learns differently. So, what I do with this child might be different than what I do with the other child. And so how beautiful is that? But with the public school, I feel like they don't even have time for that. Like they're just overwhelmed. There is a syllabus. They have to do this. Like it's all about the testing and
I can see where they are trying to incorporate a bit more in public schools, like I said, with like project-based learning. And then also, they have a lot more now with like RTI groups. So, if a child's falling behind, then they get put in a group to really try to get specialized attention.
Right.
But even that, there's so limited time in the school day that it's like we have so many students that we're trying to push through this program. And even those programs are not made to fit every child.
Right.
It's the teachers can only do so much, and it's a burden system. And I understand why it's not where the optimal level we think it should be yet. But what we can do as, conscious, aware parents is say, okay, if I've got the ability to homeschool or use a hybrid homeschool like Guiding Lights, it's kind of that middle ground.
Right.
So like Guiding Lights, we do 3 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week at school. And then the other days at home. So it's where we're kind of given that middle ground of you're getting to come to a school. You have teachers who are Waldorf inspired teachers who are wanting this type of education as well. And everybody works as a group. It's a co-op, but not so much where like the parents are teaching. So I think that's a lot of what we have in this area are co-ops where parents and are coming together and teaching each other's kids, and that's great. But we don't have many drop-off co-ops, especially ones that are not strictly Christian,
right?
Or ones that are Waldorf, because there are no Waldorf schools here. And we're not saying we're like completely Waldorf,
right?
We're Waldorf-ish or Waldorf-inspired, because it is really needing to look at where's the child developmentally, what is their temperament. I like to even look, me as a teacher, I pull my students' charts and I look at what are their big three at least, knowing their astrology and kind of I can even like make groups, based on things that I see of that nature as well. And it's just so much more freedom to really use the child as the curriculum. And not try to force curriculum on the child.
Right. It's like a holistic approach to education.
Yes.
And it's honoring, their mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, all the bodies.
All the bodies.
It's bringing it all in. And it's like, what does this child need at this moment in their development? And a lot of times it is similar, like at 7, they hit a different way, and so now we're going to bring in new ideas. But, it's so interesting. Like, I feel like it slows everything way down. Like that... not like pushing reading till the last baby tooth. Like you could let them play around with it, but like if you don't force it, then they're going to hit that stage. They're going to lose that last baby tooth and they're just going to start reading.
Yes.
So if you can just make it fun and get them to start enjoying, learning.
Yeah.
Then they're going to hit that age and they're going to take off. And then reading's just going to be so great. But I think so many kids, especially now they're trying to teach the alphabet in preschool, they're forcing letters and numbers really young, like before 3 even. I feel like they're like, go ahead and start looking at this. But like they're burnt out.
Yes.
By the time they're 7.
Yes.
And they're like, I don't even want to learn how to read anymore.
I don't like school. Yeah.
Right. Because they don't enjoy learning. And that's where I feel like Waldorf is a lot different because it teaches you to enjoy it. Yes. And it also, there's all this nature. So all the wheel of the year is going to come in, the seasons, so they're going to be like tuned in to the cycle that they're in.
Yes.
And they're going to hear these like the myths, the stories that our ancestors told. And then now they're connecting with their heritage. They're connecting to all these other cultures.
Yes.
And how beautiful is that? And in public school, they don't even start teaching history or anything until like middle school, high school. The kids don't care about stories at that point. You have to start including stories really young.
Yes.
And really that's like the basis of the early years.
Yes.
Is stories, hands-on activities, nature, play, imagination.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I notice a big difference with my son when he's playing with other kids that his imagination is so good. And these other kids are sort of like, what are you doing? And it's like they've already like taught that out of them.
Yeah.
but they're really great at reading.
Yeah.
You know,
They
but
can
they
take a
can't,
test.
right, but they can't imagine.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a problem, you know, in a way, because how are we ever going to create a new future if no one has imaginations?
Right.
So, you know, a while back I read that one of the main reasons that Steiner created Waldorf, and, you know, he's a clairvoyant. So he's able to see the auras, he's able to, you know, connect to all the bodies and see it. And so he was noticing children that were not their soul wasn't fully incarnating into their physical body, because childhood is so harsh and traumatic that they weren't wanting to be here. So their physical body was here, but their soul was starting to detach. So you know, this was like alarming to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, something's going on with the education and we have to change it. And I think about myself as a child and just how dissociated I was. And like, he probably would have saw something similar to me, because I was just disoriented, detached. You know, I liked to learn, but I hated the way that they had organized the classes. It was really draining. I was exhausted. There was no color.
Yeah.
My teachers, you know what I mean? They didn't have the greatest personalities. They weren't very loving. I mean, every now and then you would get a great teacher.
Yes.
I'm not like hating on all of them, but for the most part, I felt invisible. Like they didn't see me. I wasn't connected to them on a personal level. And that is like the opposite of Waldorf, where the teacher and the child's, you know, connection is the utmost importance.
Yeah.
Because if they don't trust you, then they cannot learn from you.
Yeah.
If they don't love you and admire you, then what are you even doing? Like, so being a role model, it becomes so important.
Yeah.
As a teacher. And I love, because you're such just a beautiful, like happy, loving person, that you would be great for that job.
Thank you.
You know, how different would we all be if we had been met with that compassion, with that care and that concern, you know, to where we wanted to learn from that person.
Yeah.
Because we're like, wow, like she's beautiful and happy and healthy. Like, I want to be like that when I grow up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I will tell you. So we just finished, you know, this past school year, and I taught the middle school group at Guiding Lights. And one of the most like rewarding things to me as a human being, like in my whole walk of life almost, is that I had these kids that adored me as their teacher. And, you know, I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm a very relaxed teacher. I still have that pitta in me, you know, where I've got some structure and we're going to do some things. And, but I am, you know, more open, and we would talk about things that they were interested in. And, you know, I started teaching them, we started doing a health and wellness class, and I started teaching them about Wim Hof, and we practiced Wim Hof breathing together. I started teaching them about cold showers, because in middle school, you know, I'm sure you remember all the emotions. I mean, you are just an emotional being.
Right.
You are straight emotions. And, I was seeing these young girls, you know, they were telling me and others that they harm themselves.
Right.
You know, they're depressed. They don't know how to deal with these emotions. They don't know how to deal with these things. And they're having little spats with their friends, and that's making them very upset. And one little girl, and they all felt comfortable enough to text me, which, you know, and I understand that that's like very big no-no in public school.
Right.
But, you know, this is so different.
Right. You're their mentor.
Yes. And they knew that they can't expect me to respond all the time. And
Right.
I'd already set the precedent with them. But they knew if they needed to tell me something that they could.
Right.
And she sent me a text one night. It was pretty late, probably about 11 p.m. and said, Miss Amanda, I just want you to know that I was feeling really bad earlier, and I really wanted to harm myself. And then I remembered what you said about the cold water, and I got in the shower and I turned it to cold, and I actually felt something again. And I decided not to harm myself. And you have been really, really influential for me. And that was like, I mean, I just bawled.
Yeah.
I just bawled because it's like, that's why I wanted to be a teacher.
Right.
This is exactly why. Because I was that little girl who was hurting so badly, but I wanted to perform. And I
Right.
did not want you to know how bad it was for me. Right. But the teachers that could see me, they made a big difference. And I knew one day I needed to give that myself, because I have went through this, this very traumatic childhood. I went through lots of trauma so that I can be that lotus flower coming out of the muck, coming out of the, out of the filth, and showing what can come from some of the most afflicted people,
Right. And how beautiful that you can have that freedom to share some of these ways like of regulating the nervous system. And that's like the whole holistic approach. They can't do that in school. And there's a guidance counselor, but nothing was more awkward to me as a child than trying to talk to my guidance counselor. Like I didn't know her, so it would have been better if it had been a teacher that at least I saw her every day than some random woman that, works in the office that you might see in passing. You don't really know them. So it's like, are you really going to tell this stranger, all this stuff? And do you really trust that they're going to be able to help you?
Yeah.
Because they can't really give you any information. They can just call your parents and be like, this kid needs therapy.
And then other kids are like, oh, why is she going to the guidance counselor's office?
Right.
It's, but when you make your culture in your classroom of, we all have these issues. People are dealing with depression and anxiety, and it's okay and it's normal, and we need to talk about it together. Then it starts getting rid of that stigma, and they do feel like, okay, that's someone I can talk to. I even had children that would come to me and say, I feel like I need therapy, but I don't know how to tell my parents. And what do you think I should say? And I would, of course, I would then let their parents know.
Right.
But I would tell them, like, I'm going to tell your, mom or dad that you've told me this, but here's what I would say, just to what you feel, and kind of help coach them through that. But then, also letting their parents know so they know that, it's a safe place, but the parents also know this is not like a place where my kids are going to come and dump stuff. And, we're not going to be, it's really a co-op. It is a...
Right. You're guiding them, but you're not trying to be their therapist. It's more of like the guidance counselor on top of your teacher role.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like Waldorf teachers, like in real Waldorf schools, they follow the students throughout their school. I mean, you start with them in kindergarten and you teach them every grade. I mean, when I read that blew my mind. I was like, so you have to learn how to teach every grade. That's amazing. Right. That is awesome to me, because I even kind of felt in my teacher training, like, am I going to be stuck in like third grade? Am I always going to teach third graders? Like, I would really like to teach middle school, but that requires another certification, different schooling. I would like high school maybe. That also requires some different certifications. And I understand why we have these systems in place. But also, if we look at the homeschooling community, there are students going all the way through kindergarten through 12th grade, and they are just fine, and they function completely well. There's lots of celebrities who went through Waldorf schools, like Jennifer Aniston being one of them.
The guy from Tool.
Yeah. So, it's like, we can say this is so different from the model that we know in the mainstream, but it's working. And it's actually, in my opinion, way better for those who can do it. I understand that not everyone can do it, but that's why we really want to offer this type of education through Guiding Lights, because of it being kind of like that middle ground between school and homeschool, and really building that rapport with the parents as well.
Right, so they can be more confident in their ability to teach too.
Yes.
And then also look into some of these approaches with their child.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of beautiful in that way. There was a girl that came to our Life as a Guru program, and I always kind of approached that as adult Waldorf. I brought in like the watercolor. I know you went to a couple. We would talk about spiritual stuff, move the body. We tried to incorporate. It was really beautiful. I wish it would have worked better, but it was great for the people that came. But there was a girl there, and she went to a Waldorf school for a couple of years in sort of the middle part of her life. So I guess middle school, kind of going into high school, when they started making their own textbooks. And then her parents separated and she stopped. But she was like explaining how life-changing just those few years were. And she kept the book. She showed them to me. And it was all these beautiful geometrical forms she had made. And it was so meaningful to her that she saved it. And you know what I mean? And when we were teaching Life as a Guru, she was like, this reminds me of Waldorf. Yeah. And I'm like, well, there's a reason for that. But, even just that little bit of time she spent, it was like, like she took off. And even when she went back to public school, she still had this foundation of like loving to learn and like viewing learning through a different lens.
Yes.
And, you know, even into her adulthood now, she's still like approaches learning from that perspective. How cool is that? So I hadn't actually met a person in real time that had went to Waldorf school. So that was really like a beautiful experience for me, you know, as I'm like teaching my children from this approach, that even though sometimes there might be like resistance or, you know, whatever, that it is over time worth it. It's worth all the effort that it takes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's really beautiful to watch my children get to just be children and to develop at their own pace. Like, how beautiful is that, to not force them into this evolution that they're not even ready for on a soul level.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really love it. And I really love that you guys are offering this, because I remember going back and I was like, I want to start a Waldorf school, but I didn't know a single person that knew who Rudolf Steiner was. I didn't know not one, besides my English professor who introduced me to him. And she gave me how to be your child's first teacher. Something about your child's first teacher. When I was pregnant with my son, and I'd already kind of like started dabbling in Steiner's work, but that was a totally different approach. I was like, oh, this is through like parenting, and it was like through all the stages, even the pregnancy. And so I started incorporating it. And I also got a book, The Incarnating Child, that I read during my pregnancy and stuff. And so both of my children have had this, you know, wisdom coming from me, like, since they were in the womb. And so how cool is that? Like, we'll see how that plays out in the future. But it felt like an honor, you know, to get to learn this just in time to get to incorporate it for this next generation.
Yeah.
Who I know is going to make huge ripples in our culture. So let's just take a moment to explore a little bit about who Rudolf Steiner is, and what's some of his work that's inspired you.
So really, my whole dive into Steiner has been through Waldorf schools, or Waldorf education. And then I started dabbling a little bit in anthroposophy, and just reading a bit about that and what it is. But I've mainly stayed within the realm of Waldorf education. I've recently joined some Facebook groups, so I'm like kind of seeing like people posting some of his other things, you know, where I'm kind of diving a little bit more into like esoteric Christianity topics as well. And so I'm really starting to read more about that. But I just loved his whole approach towards education, and making that spiritual,
right?
And seeing the child as, you know, this spiritual being that, you know, we're granted this opportunity to foster, you know, what it is to live in this life, this matrix, and really taking that as a holistic approach, because I feel like he was channeling something so big that it was great in his time, what he did, but I feel like it was needed so much now
for the future.
Yes,
he was so channeling wisdom for the future.
Yes.
And he gave us a lot of heads up. He did all that stuff on the bees. He was like, you're gonna have to start honoring the bees, and like that it starts happening.
Biodynamic farming. Yes,
especially with the farming, because we've depleted the soil. But back then people were like, what are you talking about, depleting the soil?
Yes.
But it's like, I think that's where the clairvoyance comes in, is he was able to kind of see into the future. And yes, there might be many different realities that can come to pass. But he was like, these are big things that you guys are going to have to focus on. And you're either going to start doing it now, or in the future, you're going to almost have to do it, because now you're going to have to, you know, heal the earth, because like your food's not going to grow. Yeah. You're not going to get nutrients from the food anymore. And how do bees play into that, right? He has a whole book just on bees. Yes. But yeah, I mean, he really covers every topic. I've been studying Steiner for over a decade now, and I still feel like a complete newbie. And I'm just like, wow, this is totally different. And I find it takes time just for just a small little paragraph to fully sink in. Like, I'll come back like years later and be like, oh, he did write something on that. And I don't know. It's like there's such a power to his words. It's like just vibrationally, even like a word that means nothing to you in that moment, like 10 years later, you're like, I've heard this word, and I'm just now really understanding why this word is so important. And it's like a vibration, that is in his work. And a lot of people can't ground it, I think, because it's so deep.
Yes, it is very, his educational lectures, even just on that, like it's a small book, but it took me a while because I needed to read it and kind of chew on some things, go back and read some more. And then, you have so many texts that are interpreting his work.
Right.
So then,
and those help, I think, if you can't understand the kind of language he's using. And it's all being interpreted from German anyway, so there is like that language barrier naturally.
Yeah, and I feel like that also has helped me a lot to kind of dig in a little bit more, what he's saying, and because it is so heavy, and it's just very deep, and I love that they've got all of these diagrams now that outline like what the children should be learning at certain ages, but that it's not set in stone.
Right.
Like you choose the stories you tell. So like my son, my youngest is going to be a second grader this year, and he's, the second grade year is fables, saints, and those are the two big, more literature-based topics. And so for me, I'm thinking, okay, I want to bring in some Appalachian fables.
Right.
I want to bring in, we're not just going to do saints, like we're also going to talk about culture changers, so like Martin Luther King.
Right.
Bringing in, and that's what they want you to do in Waldorf education. Right. There is no set curriculum.
Right. It's guiding you so that you can say, okay, around this time, you can start bringing in more fables.
Yes. And I feel like a lot of Steiner's work is like that. Yeah. It's like you get these nuggets of this wisdom to then take and mold into what is needed in your time and in your space and in your sphere, because I feel like it's so broad, but yet so structured as well, that you have a basis for, okay, these are like the underlying things that the consciousness needs. The child at the second grade year has that 7-year-old changing of teeth. There are those things collectively going on for children at that age. But where you live is so important because you want your fables from your culture. Right. And this is so funny. It actually kind of ties into Ayurveda. One of the first things I read in Katie Silcox's book, Healthy, Happy, Sexy, is she was studying in India, trying to learn all about Ayurveda and Tantra. And her teacher says, Ayurveda is not about you eating Indian food. It's about you eating the food of your ancestors. Like your food. Region. Like, yes, khichdi is a great, easily digestible thing that we can use during a cleanse. But hey, let's look at our heritage recipes that we have, that our bodies have been acclimated to, and how can we bring in our stories, our healing modalities, and really, I think, especially in this area, preserve Appalachian culture, because it's been looked at for so long as, people who are backwoods and hillbillies.
Moonshiners.
And, there's so much more here that we need to really, and I see so many more people now around our age, especially, really claiming Appalachia, and I love that. So that's another thing I think is so brilliant about Steiner is like, he was channeling this thing that is so big for everyone. And then you can take it and get your interpretation out of that and really, really make it fit for your life and your walk and where you live.
Right. That's beautiful. I love him so much. As soon as I read the first book, I think, was Philosophy of Freedom. And I was so drawn to it. And I realized years and years later that he was reading the Akashic Records, which is what I do. And I was told later that I'm considered of the field, which means I've always had the records with me. And I think that something about Steiner, when I would read, and Rumi's the same way. I think Rumi was writing from the records, straight from the records. And it was it felt like home. It felt like it's true. And I don't know how else to say it. It's just this is true. I don't know why it's true, but it is.
It
It
just
it
resonates.
lit me up. And then, years later, when I'm told that I'm of the field, and that's what the field he's reading from, I'm like, no wonder that it was like instant, instant love. And I've evolved as a person by studying his work, and so he would consider himself, like more a mystical Christian. He definitely believed in the Christ awakening kind of within us and things like that. So, what do you feel the main difference is between viewing Christianity through an exoteric lens versus an esoteric lens?
So for me, this is actually probably going to be a lot different than even some people who are claim to be esoteric Christians. So really what I've been diving into myself is what Bible scholars know about the Bible that is not preached about.
Right.
To me, the exoteric Christianity is that cookie cutter prosperity gospel that we're all used to hearing of, you need to tithe and, heaven versus hell and, all those things that we're so familiar with here in the Bible Belt. But to me, the esoteric Christianity, there are the layers of like Christ consciousness and all of that, but I'm even being a little more surface level of like, what does the Bible actually say that we are not looking at? It clearly says there were other gods. It clearly says that Yahweh put other gods in control of the nations. This is very biblical. Astrology is huge in the Bible.
Right.
Huge. And we cannot deny it. Daniel was a chief astrologer and chief of the Magi. But he also did not bow down to, he had his God that he did not bow down to. So really looking at these things that are plainly in sight, but just people who aren't familiar with how to translate the Aramaic, people who are scared to read like Book of Enoch, or these texts that are outside of the Bible, that really ancient Hebrew people read. They knew these things. It was part of what Jesus knew. That all of that, I really feel has been hidden and locked up, and only academia, so Bible scholars are talking about this stuff, but you go to a church and you do not hear it for the most part. Now, there are some churches starting to talk about these things, and that's great, but it's not mainstream. And so I've really been digging into Dr. Michael Heiser, Timothy Alberino. If anyone listens to like the Blurry Creatures podcast, they have some guest speakers on there that kind of touch on these things as well, where it's really talking about all of these things that are right there in front of our face of, the Elohim, the Nephilim, Mount Hermon, like all of these things are there in the Bible, and we just gloss over all that. It's like, oh no, let's just look at being the Proverbs 31 woman.
Right.
Oh, let's just look at, these certain things. And oh, that seems a little pagan sounding. I don't really want to touch those scriptures, and I don't really understand those, so I stay clear of them. No, let's actually dig into what is the Bible saying. And of course, these other texts, like I said, Enoch and some others that kind of shed light on more of these stories. There's so many resources now at our fingertips to know these things and to learn about these things, but people are scared of it because they're just so stuck in their dogma and stuck in this, if it's not fitting my box, then that feels like it's Satan. Oh gosh, that's the enemy. Well, it's actually in the Word. It's in the Word. So if you want to verify everything through the Word, then please do that and read, read and research and understand that translations sometimes need to be updated. And, we have Bible scholars that are doing this. They're digging into the Aramaic and they're digging into these original translations and seeing, okay, where did we kind of get these words wrong? And let's look at the culture of the people at that time and what are these stories really telling us? And I've really been on fire lately for the biblical astrology and seeing the gospel in the constellations.
Right, the 12 disciples, the 12 signs.
Yes. And even now, this is something that came to me a long time ago when I would totally renounced Christianity. I had a moment where I had this big revelation about God becoming man through the zodiac. And like seeing God taking on human form and then sacrificing and then going back into God, like this whole cycle came to me, and I wrote like pages. It just like something I just channeled all of a sudden, and then I was kind of put that to bed for a while, and then now this stuff is starting to come up, and I'm relating it. I'm like, okay, I can see like the whole wheel of the zodiac and the whole story unfolds throughout the whole thing, and so I'm really starting to try to dig a little bit more into that and learn more about that. I haven't gotten too deep yet. But that's probably where my innermost cave time is coming. And that's one of my subjects I'm kind of on the fringe of digging into a lot more.
Yeah. I just had this epiphany as you were talking that maybe the disconnect with a lot of Christians with actually reading the Bible themselves is that they've been told that, the apple, which is the tree of knowledge, is actually what was the downfall. And so there might be this like unconscious fear of knowledge. Or if you look at the school system, just not a desire to learn.
Yeah.
And so they might not even feel that they are capable of reading it on their own. And so they're going to rely completely on their pastor to do all that work for them.
Yeah.
And if that pastor is only going to, focus on very, like the same kind of passages that just reinforce what he's already trying to say.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's almost not their fault. I feel like there might be an unconscious fear of their own intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, as someone who grew up, trying to read the Bible, it was hard for me.
It is. And it makes you start kind of questioning your own intelligence.
Yes.
And it's really because it was written in a different time period. There's references to things that really don't make any sense. You're going to have to look up definitions. There's like some allegory going on.
Yes.
Some things are comparing this to that. This is a metaphor. So this is where, when we're teaching our children how to read and we're teaching literature, it becomes a really key component to their future spiritual health, because they won't be able to interpret any of these texts on their own if they don't understand how to read and learn.
Yeah.
Written word.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is a disconnect in that, and maybe even collectively, because for so many centuries, it wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to read it. And so I even think like maybe in a past life, they still have this fear from something else where they weren't allowed. And like, they're like, no, it has to be interpreted for me. I couldn't possibly interpret God's messages myself.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like there's a lot more going into it than just they don't want to see it. But like, there's probably some fear. There's probably some veils between them, but I think the whole point in, Jesus is like this direct communication now that we have with the divine. And so, even if you're not reading it, I think you can still get like almost like channel messages just by tuning into the Master Jesus, right? Because he has that wisdom. And I feel like all the time, like I hear, Jesus's voice in the back of my head telling me like these random quotes and things like that. So I feel like it does come through. Like we have our own intuitive wisdom that comes through. But there's something really nice about being able to analyze the text.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like the overarching message of the gospel is easy to understand.
Right.
And that there's a truth there that collectively we are going to know. And that is the truth that's laid out in the stars.
Right.
Because, that if we think about like language being a barrier, well, seeing the signs and wonders is not a barrier. Seeing symbols is not a barrier. So the gospel itself and the message of Jesus is very easy to understand. However, to become a disciple, to really follow his path, to really try to take this Christian walk, you're going to have to, you're going to have to dig in a little more.
Right.
You're going to have to try to learn and understand, okay, what are all these texts telling me? Because you could take any verse from any book and use it for anything that you wanted to. You can quote whatever you want to give your point its back. But to really kind of take these stories and look at the cultural aspects that they were touching on, and you get so much more revelation from that, and such a deeper walk and such a deeper understanding. For me as a Christian, I feel so very called to talk to people who are not Christians,
Right.
Because I feel like I have seen the beauty in a lot of different things, and I see these bigger overarching messages that really need to come out. And if people are always stuck in these dogmatic ways of communicating and talking about those things, how are we ever going to share this beautiful thing of we're both trying to work towards bringing about a better world.
Right.
We all want heaven on earth.
Right.
We all want something great for our kids, or I would hope so. Most people that I talk to, we all have a similar goal. We want to love each other. We want to love, ourselves. We want to love God. And that's what Jesus told us to do. Love God, love others, love yourself. That's what we need to do. But we get so caught up in like, oh, this person does
different,
does Kundalini yoga, or this person does this, and that seems this way to me. Or even, on the other spectrum, that person's a Christian, they're probably really shut off.
Right.
Well, that's not always the case. I feel like I'm really feeling very called to just opening this conversation with everyone, that would want to talk to me about it.
Right.
Because I feel like it's so needed, especially for us to move forward as a collective consciousness.
Right.
Is how can we work together and stop seeing it as, division. Divided, we're falling. But together we can stand and we can move forward in and really bringing about what's needed. And that truly in the gospel is bringing heaven on earth.
Right.
Now. It is now. The kingdom is now. It's not a fire insurance to one day go to some pearly gates and, I will be saved one day. No, it's heaven is now. And
Right.
What are you doing now to bring that about for everyone in your life?
Right. Are you making this experience heaven or hell?
Yeah.
And when you're rejecting and in this rebelling against the other, you're creating division.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like I'm hearing so many Pink Floyd lyrics in my head as we're talking. You're creating all this division, this us and them. And at that point, you have to dial it back. If you start seeing others as them,
Yes.
then we have a problem.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you're, an esoteric spiritualist or what, or a Gnostic or whoever you are. If you start saying, oh, well, they're the others and we are the elite. And that's where I think the problem is because it's like, no, we're one. We are one collective. We have different experiences. We have different stories. We have different cultures. We have different beliefs because God shows up in all this beautiful variety.
Yeah.
He never takes the same form twice.
Yeah.
And there's wisdom in every single human being, every single book. You can open up any random book and find a sentence that's enlightening.
If you're open to it.
If you're open to it.
Yeah.
And so it's like unnecessary, to separate ourselves. And I think that's why I can't call myself in anything. It's because as soon as I identify with one, I become separate from the other. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't. I'm really not. I'm saying as Aquarius rising that I have a hard time because it feels instantly like I'm dividing myself from others. So if I call myself, an esotericist, am I separating myself from the scientific community? Am I no longer studying exoteric truths? Am I no longer looking at philosophy the same? I can be all of it. I can be all of it and not even take on any of it as my identity. And as somebody that has sort of like, as I've shifted, like I even told you earlier, like when I started doing Kundalini yoga, it kind of became a part of my identity. And at that time I really needed it. It was giving me strength. It was giving me something to strive towards because I was broken and I didn't really have an identity. My ego had been destroyed. Helped me cultivate a healthy personality, I think, and a healthy body and a healthy spirit. And then I kind of didn't need it as much. Like the training wheels came off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I just, I would be in a really bad place and I would just start doing the Kriya that I had learned in real time. Not because I had said at 4 o'clock a.m. or, 4 a.m. I'm going to do my sadhana. And it's like, and I'm not saying that that's not beautiful. Some people really, like the rituals
Yes.
are very important for some people. And they are for me, but I just find myself constantly evolving and my life is changing. And sometimes I can't do the practices
Yeah.
the same way. And so I've allowed myself to evolve, but the practices are there because I have integrated them.
Yeah. It's your toolkit.
Right. And so when if I go through a traumatic experience, like I know this random wisdom will come up from my subconscious because I've stored it there.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. And I feel like if I had limited myself to just studying one path, then that's all I'm going to get. But I want to study all of it. I love all of these different beliefs. And I really do see, like how you do, like these bridges between this and that. And, and I'm like, I think they're all kind of saying the same thing. But they have such a beautifully diverse spin on it.
Yeah.
And I like that. It's like it keeps it fresh. I like that in this religion, the Savior has blue skin. Let's talk about why he's blue. Let's talk about, Jesus's lineage a little bit. Let's talk about all these different ways of looking at everything. And I think that the more you focus in on something, you can see even more and more detail.
Yeah.
So in this way, maybe studying one path is good because you're going to really digest it. And I appreciate those people. I appreciate the scientists that don't study anything else but science because guess what? They get to do all this boring work and I get to just read over their work and say, okay, that does validate this. Thank you.
Yes.
So I think some of us are more called to really say, I want to just do this one thing. I want to just be a devout this. Because you're going to help bring more awareness around that topic that someone like me can't necessarily do. But I might be able to help bridge a lot of it because I can be like, oh, that sounds a lot like, this Asian myth I read last week. That's almost like exactly the same.
Yeah.
And they might not be able to see how it links in with other things. So it's like, think of all the 12 signs, all the different perspectives, all the different personalities. And then when we come together in community.
Yeah.
What if our community could have diversity, different religions coming together? And this person's saying, oh, yeah, well, this is how we see it. And we're saying, oh, well, that's how they see it. And that, I feel like, is Christ consciousness, is when we can all come together and say, we can work together. We can see the connection, how this is all just one story.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. That's why I love having people like you on the show that can see that. And it's just wonderful. I feel like we really are headed in a good direction for all that.
Yeah.
So could you share a little bit about the women's circle that you've been inspired to create? What are some of the details on that?
So this is really where my Ayurvedic coaching is kind of morphing. So I'm still working with one-on-one clients, but I'm wanting to start a transformational journey where really it is more women focused because, we're going to be talking about aligning cycles and, lots of things that are feminine issues or feminine medical types of things that are more for women.
Right.
And so really what I'm wanting to start creating is a group of women that we are going to go on a year-long journey. So we're going to go through the whole wheel of the year together, celebrating the different, turns of the wheel and then the new moons, the full moons, having practices for those. And all of this is going to incorporate Ayurveda. So looking at the season that we're in and how does all of that come together and really working as a community. So we'll be doing, like a fall cleanse, a spring cleanse, where we're all kind of working on these health goals together. But, like if someone's experiencing a lot of high vata and they're not ready for a cleanse, that's great. We're here to support and nourish in whatever way we can together as a group. So I'm really feeling called to lead that and then also to incorporate a little bit of ecstatic dance into that as well. I just had my first ecstatic dance experience I told you about when we were talking before the show. And I really feel called to that as well. So it's really kind of a fringy, woo-woo, witchy-ish kind of Ayurvedic, yogic mashup of this transformational journey that, to me, what I like to call my path is wild and wise. So I've got the wild and I've got the wisdom, and I need both.
Right.
to integrate and really find that middle path, that little fulcrum, you know, is I want that wild and the wise, and we're really meeting at the and.
Right.
And so we're kind of going to go on this journey together of, you know, learning about these topics that light us up. And eventually I would like to bring in like a book club aspect to it, to where we're kind of studying texts together and digging into topics and bouncing ideas off of each other. So like you said, you know, someone might have very strong background in Vedic studies, and they could say, wow, that really sounds like, you know, something that I heard about Shiva or Vishnu. And, you know, we can kind of bring those things in and talk about them from all these different aspects.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. That sounds wonderful. So what's the best way for our listeners to book a coaching session with you, or sign up for one of your yoga classes, or get more information about the Women's Circle?
So I'm on Instagram at Lil the Mama, and on Facebook as Amanda Lynch, and just really messaging through either of my social media platforms is my main point of contact.
Okay.
And I am taking, you know, whoever's interested in the Women's Circle. I'm trying to get a feel right now and trying to put together the group before I really start anything up, because like I said, I want it to be a year-long transformation, so we really wouldn't be starting until coming towards the end of the year and getting ready for the new year, and kind of starting all together at one time.
And this would be in person.
So we would do in-person meetings and some Zoom meetings as well.
Okay.
So that we can kind of do both, meet up more often, kind of give that flexibility, because I know a lot will probably be moms as well.
Right.
So it will be some in-person and then some virtual meetings.
All right, wonderful. So if you're in Knoxville, make sure to check that out.
Yes. And then I teach yoga at Renegade Yoga Studio, at K-Town Yoga in Powell, and at Crossroads Fitness in Powell. And you can sign up on the Mind Body app for those. Teach anything from Kundalini to aerial, Vinyasa. And I'm about to start a new class called Yoga Fusion at K-Town. That's going to be it's actually going to be a mixture of Vinyasa and Kriya. It's like a light intro to Kundalini.
Okay.
It's a little Kundalini-ish, but it's not straight Kundalini.
I love all the things and the diversity and all the wonderful things that you offer. It's very like Virgo, because it's like the mutable earth, but it's so grounded, but it's like, it takes so many forms. It's so cool to watch you grow.
Malleable.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to make this wonderful episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.